Right, very simply, I am sure we have worked out that we have all been living under massive deceptions for all of our lives, our parents, our grandparents, and in fact most, if not all of our ancestors. And I find it very hard to even think of things where we're not being deceived. And I'd like to start at the beginning, explain them to you, start at the beginning. And I start right at the very beginning with one, I think, basic truth, which we can work from. And within a few screens, hopefully you'll understand why I've started this way and where I'm going with the argument. The basic truth I start with is the universe, whatever it is the truth. If it isn't, we are in deep shit. I add another truth very quickly after that, because I'm looking at life forms right at this moment, and I say, let's add another one. Life exists within the universe. I believe that's true as well. You wouldn't be here, neither would I, if that wasn't true. But I'll also add another one. Life exists within the universe on planets, at the very least. This is allowing for the fact that life might exist in outer space. We don't know. But it certainly exists on planets because we live on one. A rather beautiful one, from my point of view, and especially this part of it. But let's think about that another way round. It's saying life exists where it can be supported by the universe. Now that's now moving away to something that's perhaps slightly less obvious. And then we go a bit further and say life can't exist if it's not supported by the universe. And why is that important to consider? I think it's very important to consider because there are approximately, no one's actually come up with an exact figure, there are approximately 1.7 million examples of sentient life on planet Earth. That's life that's aware of itself, which also includes, you know, bacteria and things like that, of course. That's like amoebas and stuff like that, things that grow, all the way up to human beings. Now, the question is, can these life forms exist without full support from the planet? Okay, what would happen if any aspect of this full support couldn't exist? And full support, by the way, not only includes the obvious, perhaps like light, heat, water, for us I mean, and for most species. Light, even plants, for example, need the light, need the heat, need the water and so on, need the minerals from the ground. Okay, so I'm talking about non-sentient life there. Let's even go that far. But also, of course, there's other aspects, the ability to procreate. Okay, if you have a life form that doesn't have the ability to procreate, it will die out. Getting rid of waste materials, that's another one. That's got to happen. Otherwise you would, you know, if Thomas Crapper hadn't invented the pull chain, we'd fill up and Mr. Creosote, wouldn't we? Blow up. Okay, the planet has to support this. For example, what did we do before the big pharmaceutical companies started to get going about 200 years ago? How did we get rid of our diseases, our problems? I think we know the answer to that. The plants provided. And homeopathic doctors have absolute enormous great tomes of cures for every single thing that can go wrong with the human being and also quite a lot of the domestic animals, using nothing more than plants, which can be found in various places on the planet. The Earth provides everything, including the means to fix us when we go wrong. So it provides our light, our heat, our water, our food, and to fix us as well when we go wrong. Full support. Now, the point is, if anything necessary to support a life form does not exist within the basic resources, then that life can't exist, or if it actually starts up, it's going to die out. So now I've come to the point I'm trying to make, which is, I hope I have, yes. What is not provided by the planet that we believe is absolutely essential? How about money, legalese, religion and politics? If the earth provided these, yes, I would say it was essential. But the earth does not provide any of those. So I say they're not essential to life. In fact, they're all, by the way, exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. And what's worse, they are all massive deceptions. They all thoroughly depend on, I suggest, misplaced faiths. And they result in nothing more than mind prisons. David Icke's description being prisons without the bars. If you want to keep somebody in prison, put them in a mind prison. There's no bars, they think they're free. What was it Edmund Burke said? Those most hopelessly enslaved are those who falsely believe that they are free. They think they're free. They go about their life never realising that they're hopelessly enslaved. Okay, let's look at this. Let's analyse what I just said. Start in reverse order. Politics. What is it? What is politics? Faith placed in something or someone. Your MP, your government. Now, is this placed correctly? Is it reasonably placed, or is it misplaced? What do you think? Do you love David Cameron and Gordon Brown and Tony Blair and John Major and Margaret Thatcher and so on? Yes. Well, I know what I think. Let's look at the second one, religion. Faith placed in something. Your priest, your vicar, your father, an almighty. Is that reasonably placed? What do you think? I say, if one person has a delusion, it's called insanity. If billions have the same delusion, it's called religion, is what I say. Legalese, what's that? Legalese is an English look-alike. It's the language in which statutes are written. So it's got English words printed. The catch is the meanings are not the same as the meanings that you would read if you only knew Oxford English. That's the catch. One very important distinction in legalese is the word person. P-E-R-S-O-N, person. In legalese, I'm sure most people here would think that they are a person. In legalese, yes, that's true. Everybody here is a person. The problem with legalese is it goes on and adds another definition. It says any group of people can, for legal purposes, be called a person. So you've got the situation where it defines a human being with limbs, with mind, with DNA, a human being that could be jailed as a person. It calls a natural person. And then it goes on to define corporations, companies, as a different kind of person. They call it an artificial person, but a person nevertheless. So in the statute, the word person can mean a company, or it can mean you. Now, a company doesn't have DNA. A company doesn't have a mind, doesn't have a brain. A company can't be jailed. You can't put a company into jail. A company doesn't have limbs. It can't even pick up a pen and write its own mark. And yet, according to legalese, you can equate that with someone like yourselves who can pick up a pen and make your mark. Even if you can't spell, you can at least make a cross. And you've got a brain. You can hold knowledge. You've got memory. You can remember what happened. And you can be jailed. But you can't jail a company. So how could you possibly, it's absurd to think that you could possibly have faith in legalese. And by the way, person is not the only one, not by a long way. There's a lot of words that have been expanded, in the meaning expanded. The word understand, for example, is another one. You think it means to comprehend. Yes, it does. But it also means to stand under what legalese dictates. To stand under. There are others. So, we're putting our faith in Parliament and Congress for America and Congresses, even the Trade Union Congress, if you will, to create statutes. And look what they've done. So, in the 800 years that they've existed, that Parliament's existed, do we really think that this experiment in human relations, which is all it is, Parliament, is it a failed, or is it an utterly corrupt and failed one, or has it, been a brilliant success? Well, again, I know what I think. So that's 3 faiths. Got it right? That's 3 faiths misplacing something from my point of view. What about the 4th one, money? Well, what is money? No, it's not what we buy things with. Because without money, you can't buy things. I mean, it's basically, that answer is not what it is, it's what you do with it. I'm asking what it is. For example, if I say, what's a bicycle pump? You say, well, it's a pump for pumping up bicycle tyres. No, sorry. You're using the word you're trying to define in the definition. To define a bicycle pump, you would have to say it's a cylinder with a piston inside, and on the outstroke it sucks air in, and on the upstroke it pushes air out through a valve. And you could use it for inflating tyres, but you could also use it for lots of other things like pumping up balloons. The point is, you have to make a definition. You can't use the word you're trying to define or any association with it. So what is money? What is money? Anybody got any idea? Sorry, do you not use money all day? I can't, sorry, with these lights I can't really see you very well. All right, fine. Sorry, did somebody say something?
Paper and metal.
Sorry?
Paper and metal.
Okay, paper and metal. Yes, that's actually not true. That's a manifestation of it in real terms. Good try, though. Good try. I think you'll understand that that's not the answer in a second, because I'm going to define it. Money is credit. Oh, right. Okay, so that's just another word. Very clever, Veronica. That's spin, isn't it? Because you took a word and you defined it with a completely different word. No, the reason I called it credit, oh, by the way, if you don't believe me, see your bank statement. Well, these days, actually, they talk about money in and money out. But some while ago, you would actually see columns of credits and the opposite, debits. And I think most people here will realise that an accounting ledger contains a column of credits and a column of debits, and the credits are with numbers and the debits are with numbers, and it might actually have a third column called balance, which is the result of subtracting the two at any point in time. There are other columns like dates and transaction type, but it's the columns of credits and debits. That's the money. So money's credit, but the reason I say that is because if you then go to a dictionary and you find out, well, what's credit? The dictionary is now right. It's absolutely correct, because the first definition of credit is faith placed in something. So now go back. Politics, faith placed in something. Religion, faith placed in something. Legalese, faith placed in something. Money, faith placed in something. I did say a few screens ago that they're all the same thing. And I say, if one person has a delusion, it's called insanity. If billions have the same delusion, it's called money. Because all it is faith. Faith. And we can change our faiths just by thinking something different. Please explain to me why we need these, I believe, misplaced. I don't know what you think. You might think they're very well placed. But I believe they're misplaced. Planet Earth doesn't provide them from its own basic resources. Planet Earth is not that stupid. Now, no other life form of the 1.7 million sentient life forms recognises them. Okay? And manages to survive quite happily without them. Are they missing something? Or are we missing something? Could we humans be sufficiently far-sighted such as to jettison money, legalese, religion and politics into deceptions, they are by the way, into the dustbin of history? Because personally, from my point of view, I think it's about bloody time we did. Money, I assume you're here because you are interested in freedom. I mean, it's part of the title of my book, Freedom is More Than Just a 7-Letter Word. It's very simple if you look at money versus freedom. I say, and I think it's going to be obvious, if you want money, you can't have freedom. If you want freedom, you can't have money. If you want both, that's what you got. You've got the freedom to come here. I've got the freedom to give this presentation. You've got the freedom to come and listen. You paid a little bit of money at the door, so you've got both. So why are you here? What's the problem? The problem is, you know, the reason why you're here is you know that ain't right. Now you need to get your head around this, and by money I mean any monetary system. Because you'll hear people proposing that, well, what we need is a different monetary system. Don't let the Bank of England do it. Let's have someone else doing it. I mean, for example, Lewis and East Sussex, they do have their own local currency. A Lewis pound, I don't know what it's called, but a Lewis pound is equivalent to a Bank of England pound. And people can buy and sell in Lewis in this local currency. And they can always change it, they can always exchange it for what most people would call real money. The reason why they do that is because if you're buying in Lewis money, it helps to keep the money within the local shops. You know, it keeps local businesses going. So yes, you can have different monetary systems, and there's a thing called a let's system. Right. Vic Beck, Canadian I think he is, he points out the obvious. Due to taxation, you can never afford what you yourself made. Your employer says what you did was worth, say, £1,000 in a month or whatever, a year, or, well, I mean, if you're a barrister, 5 minutes. That's what you did is worth £1,000. After tax, you'll actually receive, I don't know, 750. I don't know. I didn't, you know, work it out like a tax inspector would. I've just picked a number. It's going to be less than £1,000. That's the point. So you never physically receive enough credits to buy what you yourself created. Your 750 that you actually receive will not buy something worth £1,000 that's marked up as £1,000. Of course, worth, buy, money, etc. are all imaginations anyway. What's the value of this? Whatever I imagine. What's this gold ring worth? To me, nothing, because I don't want a gold ring. Okay, I will be coming back to money with a vengeance, but I have to explain a lot of things. So I now take and fundamentally build up a basis for the later things. So I'm now going to move to another tack, but I will be coming back to this, don't worry, because I'm really going to hit that home, that money business. Legal versus lawful. Are you law-abiding or legal-abiding or both? Do you know the difference? Okay. What do I mean? Right. There are three things we call law. And what I'm going to present is a short analysis of those three things by their characteristics. And you'll understand why I do that. I'm going to start at the beginning with the universe and the laws of nature that come with the universe. And there are three essential characteristics. Mankind does not make them. We had absolutely no hand in the creation of the law of gravity. You just observe them. We just observe them and their effects. We enumerate and evaluate them, and in most cases we're able to devise mathematical formulae to express them and utilise them and interutilise them, in other words, apply them. Examples of the law of gravity, there's Newton's laws of motion, Boyle's law, Maxwell's law, Charles' law, Ohm's law, etc. So that's the first characteristic. We don't make them, the laws of nature. Second characteristic, they apply universally and unilaterally without fear or favour. No courts are required. I usually drop something at this moment, or I'm not going to do it right now, but I usually have a pen or something and I hold it there and I say, if I let go to this pen, which way is it going to go? That way, that way, that way, or that way? Oh, it went downwards. We all knew that because we didn't need a court to tell us. We didn't need an opinion. We know things go down. There's no penalty for breaking them because they cannot be broken. A rocket ship going up is breaking the law of gravity. No, it's not. If that motor cuts out, what's going to happen to the rocket ship? It's going to come down again. So, that's the basic thing we call law. Now let's look at the next thing, which we call law. It's known as the common law, the law of the land. You'll hear police, judges, bailiffs talking about the law of the land, and they'll be talking about statute law, which is the next thing I'll describe after this screen. The statute law could not possibly be the law of the land. The law of the land is the law that is required by land dwellers such that they can live in peace with all other land dwellers. In 1215, the Magna Carta was written and signed in June of 1215. And it refers to the law of the land and the law of the realm. Now, the whole point about the Magna Carta is that the reason why it was written and signed by both sides, including one side being the monarch at the time, King John, is because there was no parliament and there were no statutes. The first parliament to appear in any reasonable form it took another 80 years to evolve, at about 1295. At that point, yes, they started to make statutes. But if we have a document 80 years prior to the invention of Parliament, referring to the law of the land, then anything Parliament does cannot therefore be the law of the land, can it? It's a logical impossibility. So the law of the land is actually, another word for it, is the common law, which was what the Magna Carta was fundamentally documenting. And the common law, as we will come on to see, is basically common sense. Right, however, it comes from common sense. So yes, mankind does make it. Makes it based entirely on common sense. Is it common sense to go around killing people in order to live in peace? Well, I suppose if you killed everybody else, yes, I suppose you would then live in peace. But that's a little bit difficult. Why don't you just leave them alone and let them leave you alone, and then that's another way of living in peace, isn't it? Right, because they're based on common sense, they're universal and unchangeable. What you know to be right, fair, honourable and just is what I know to be right, fair, honourable and just, and will always be so, I submit. Now, they are applied by courts, called courts de jure, that's courts of justice. A serious attempt at fairness of application is by means of a jury of 12. The idea is, if you are accused of something, the people who are doing the accusing, put their accusation to 12 other impartial individuals, don't know you from Adam, don't know you from Eve. You then put your point of view to that same jury. The idea is certainly was and should be and is, the jury, using its common sense, attempts to put itself in the two positions and asks itself the question, each member of the jury should ask themselves the question, what would I do in those circumstances? And if, in those circumstances, they would do what either party would do, then that's the way they should go with the verdict. If they think that the accused person did wrong in those circumstances, then they find the accused person guilty. If they feel that the accused person didn't really have any choice, and in that situation they would have done the same thing, whatever it is, then they should find the accused not guilty. That's the way the juries work, and that's the common law. There is a penalty for breaking the common law because they can be broken if one is prepared to accept the consequences. But the point I'm making, or trying to make, is that that's the people doing its absolute best to emulate the law of gravity. It's not a perfect system, it is not 100%, but if it's 95%, it's got to be far better than any other way we could devise. Now, let's go, that's the second thing. Now let's go on to the third thing that we call law. The legislated rules of societies, in other words, statutes. In other words, legal, created by parliaments and congresses. Mankind does make them, yes. Mankind changes them in accordance with its own desires, wishes, needs, etc. of the party that's in power, or maybe the masters of the party that's in power. Mankind can wipe them away, repeal them, very rarely does that happen, but they can make them at the stroke of a pen, virtually. Now, compare mankind does make them with the original natural law, mankind doesn't make them. So you've got an opposite, haven't you? So if natural law is called law, legal, in the first characteristic, is exactly the opposite. B, they're applied by courts called courts de facto, courts of arbitration, tribunals. They're not applied equally because they always depend on judgment. Judges, magistrates. They're not applied equally, it's often said there's one law for the rich and one law for the poor. Or one law for us and one law for them, which is generally achieved by decisions that emanate from one highly paid psychopath, in other words a judge, or 3 gobsmackingly naive plonkers, so-called magistrates, generally led by a minor psychopath, the one that sits in the middle. I'm sorry, I write that on the basis of being in court and seeing quite a few court cases. Not against me, but in support of other people. Now, these tyrannies are being precisely what the Magna Carta 1215 idea of a common law jury avoids as best it can. So, now let's look at, so A is the opposite of natural law. B, natural law is no courts are required. So B is also the opposite of natural law. C, there's always a penalty for breaking them because they can be broken if one is prepared to accept the consequences. Natural law, there's no penalty for breaking them because they can't be broken. So, set against legal, set against natural law, opposite, opposite, opposite. Legal is exactly the opposite of lawful. But we use the same word. It's the law. It's the law. We're using the same word. It's like using the same word for fire and water. Oh, my house is on fire. Let's put some fire on it to put it out. Is fundamentally the mindset that you're using there. The reason why you're using that mindset is because it's been ingrained in you. That's a deception that's been ingrained in you, your parents, your grandparents, your ancestors. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Oh, no, I haven't. Sorry. Well, at least I don't think I did. Oh, yes. Sorry. That screen is fundamentally saying what I just said in words. Right. Legal operates. Legal statutes. I'll be coming on to what statutes are and what societies are. Don't worry. Legal operates entirely via paperwork on names. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. My God, that is so untrue. Everything nasty that ever happened to you was because you had a name. And it was the name that was used. That's another deception. What's your name, says the policeman. You are Veronica Chapman. No, I'm not. Well, you are. Everyone's got a name. Oh, I see. You have actually asked everyone on this planet if they have a name, have you? So you can say that, for sure. Well, everybody knows everyone's got a name. Well, actually, I don't think you can prove that. And secondly, I am not my name. I am not my name. Funnily enough, I'm certainly not my name. I'm sure most people here realise that I'm transsexual and that I wasn't actually born and named Veronica when I was born by my parents. I was actually given a boy's name. And I grew up with a boy's name. And it wasn't really until I left my family that I had at the time and went off on my own that I came out as the transsexual I always was. I was born a transsexual. And I decided to take a name that was most or more appropriate to the way I am, or what I am. And I went into a solicitor and I did a thing called a deed poll, which meant that I signed a piece of paper in my original name, and then I signed another, that same piece of paper underneath as Veronica. Now, this human being went into the solicitor's office. This human being, this flesh and blood, came out. So the name, my original name, had been detached, and my new name attached by the deed poll. So that proves that I am not the name. Everything that's written to you is written to your name. It's not to your flesh and blood. It actually can't be to your flesh and blood. It's to your name. And all actually you have to do is to say, I'm not that name, fundamentally. None of them believe you. I mean, the police don't believe you, the courts don't believe you, and so on, of course. Actually, there are some police, funnily enough, in recent weeks, who started to realise that maybe that's the truth. That people are not their names. I'll hopefully come on to a lot of that. That's like the latest stuff, which I hope to talk about. But that's if there's time. Okay, think about an identity parade. Think about an identity parade. Do they stand there with their name, holding up the name? Or do they just stand there as the witness walks by, looking at each individual in the lineup? That's the one they might go. Not by the name, because they're not holding a name. They do it by observation of the flesh and blood, because that's a common law situation. Common law is all about human beings. It's not about names and paperwork. Fundamentally, what happens in the common law, we look at a situation, we use our common sense, and we go, oh, it makes sense to make sure that justice is never delayed. All right? Oh, so that was written down in the Magna Carta. It makes sense that people who administer the law should know the law and abide by it, and be minded to observe it well. So that's written down as Article 45. Common sense stuff. Legal, which comes out of Parliament. So in other words, so with common law, what we do is we see reality, the reality of a situation, and we write down a common sense situation that fits the reality. Parliament, they write the statute, right? And then they say, that creates reality. Whatever the statute says is now reality. No, reality doesn't work that way. Reality is reality. You can observe it and write it down. You can't just write a statute and that makes it real. It's the opposite way round. The deception is to make you believe that you are your name when you're not. Your name is nothing more than a fiction for the convenience of legal to operate on you without your consent. Also, for the convenience of your parents and your friends to call you. Which is why I'm Veronica of the Chapman family, if you go back to my first screen, or if you look at the cover of my book. I'm Veronica of the Chapman family, as commonly called. So when people go, Veronica, I go, oh, that's me. But that's all it is, to get my attention, to get your name, the convenience of your parents and friends to get your attention. But it's no more than that. No more than that. And they certainly don't have the right to use that to do you for council tax, income tax, road tax, insurance, TV licence, you name it. Parking fees, parking fines, you name it. Don't have the right. Rough justice. I've already sort of alluded to this. Can you be jailed? Yes. Can your DNA be taken? Yes. Can your local council or the Crown Prosecution Service or a utility company be jailed? No. Not the company. And that's basically what would be the court case would be against you. You know, Herefordshire Council versus whatever. Can the local council, Crown Prosecution Service or utility company have its DNA taken? No. How can any honourable adjudication take place between these two parties? You, the human being, have just about everything to lose, and they've got virtually nothing to lose. The playing field is stacked vertically against you. They are there, you are there. There is no point in even trying to discuss it with them or argue with them, but I'll come on to what you can do. Interesting, the last one. One of the things that the police love to do, or do these days, is to take your DNA. How dare they? But the very fact that you've got DNA and they can take it proves you are not a legal fiction. It proves you're not your name. It proves you're a flesh and blood. So when you get the summons to your name, Mr. or Miss or Mrs. da-di-da, you can write back and say, but I'm not that name, and the fact that my DNA was taken is forensic evidence that I'm flesh and blood and not that name. That name is just marks on a piece of paper, a sound in the air when it's spoken, or pixels on a computer screen. It's not me, I'm flesh and blood. I have a soul, I have limbs, I have a brain, I have spirit. I can kick a football. Okay, what is the common law then? It fundamentally breaks down into four aspects. I've said it's the way to live in peace, and it's the common sense way to live in peace. But analysing it a little bit further than that, each of these is no deliberate and to prevent accidental as far as you can. I'll take the first one, no deliberate harm to anyone else, and as much precaution as is reasonable to prevent accidental harm from your actions. Don't leave things where people can fall over them. Okay, you could harm them. Be aware where you leave something. But in all of these cases, there is a point where it becomes unreasonable. The example I was given when I learned to drive buses, right? Well, I actually was tested to do an emergency stop in a bus. Now, you are taught as a bus driver that you must not, do emergency stops normally. You're taught to drive without the need to stop sharp. Now, I know a lot of bus drivers stop sharp, but they're not working according to the way they were taught. For an hour and a half in their lives, they did drive properly, otherwise they wouldn't have a licence to do it. Trouble is, they get the licence and then get back in the bus and drive it like you would drive a car. Problem with buses is you can't drive it like a car because there may be people elderly people hanging on the rails for dear life, or someone even standing up there with a baby in their arms. So you're supposed to drive a bus with anticipation of what's likely to happen and slow down accordingly so that, you just slow down nicely. But you are tested on an emergency stop because there are circumstances where you may have to do an emergency stop, very rarely. And the example they give is you're driving down the road in service at 29 miles an hour, 1 mile an hour under the speed limit, so you're absolutely perfectly making progress, okay? Line of parked cars, as you drive down the road, out from between the cars runs a child in front of you chasing a ball. Bang, you kill the child. Okay? But because you see it happen and you jam the brakes on. And in actual fact, not quite a child, but a car came out of a side turning on Christmas Eve 1999 right in front of me and crossed the road right in front of me. I was on the main road, it came out the side road. And I hit it. I didn't stand a chance. So that actually, a similar situation did actually happen to me. Okay, the point is you cannot, in the case where you've killed the child in that way, or in the case of my accident, I wasn't charged with anything for the very simple reason that it was quite obvious from the scene. And also, by the way, I had passengers on my bus who also said what had happened. I don't know whether the other driver was pissed or whatever, but just came out onto a main road, straight across in front of me. Must have been doing about 30 miles an hour. I just caught a flash of it in my eyes. And the road that it was heading for was a very short cul-de-sac with a railway line at the other end of it. So quite what they were doing, trying to get down that at 30 miles an hour, I don't know. I think they just must have been pissed. It's Christmas Eve. But I never heard any more about it. Certainly didn't prosecute me. In the case of a child running out with a ball, you are not to blame. If there's any blame in that circumstance, I think it's pretty obvious. It's the parents who allowed the child to get into that situation. They're the guilty party. So there is a reasonable cut-off. You cannot drive around at 1 mile an hour everywhere just in case a car comes out in front of you or a child runs out in front of you with a ball. That would be totally unreasonable. Whether or not 30 miles an hour or speed limits are valid or not is another argument. But certainly, you know, the speed limit argument is something else. No deliberate loss to anyone else. Again, the same thing. You don't steal from other people. You don't take their property. Okay, because that causes rancor, causes arguments. You know, they might like come round with a few mates and do some damage to you or to members of your family. That's not living in peace. So you don't steal, you don't take other people's property. Once again, deliberately, as far as possible by accident. But at the end of the day, if you find something and it's obviously been there for years and you think you can use it and obviously nobody else wanted it, hey, finders keepers. No deliberate breach of another's peace. Do not play rock music loudly at 3 a.m. when you've got paper-thin walls and the couple next door have managed to get their young baby to sleep, and so on. Loads and loads of possible breaches of peace. Bailiffs knocking on your door is a breach of your peace. No deliberate deviousness or mischief in your promises, agreements and arrangements. Say what you mean what you say. I said I would come here tonight. I came here tonight because I promised to do it. Fundamentally, to act responsibly. Oh, and so, by the way, you came here tonight, which is very kind of you. Fundamentally, to act responsibly towards all others and to be prepared to take responsibility for all your actions. Don't go around blaming other people. It's very easy to blame other people. You've got to learn to accept the blame. In other words, just plain, ordinary, common sense. Where does the common law come from? Okay. Well, we heard a judge say it comes from judges make the common law. One judge said that. Just shows how much he knew. It's the common sense of land dwellers to live together in peace. So where do you think it comes from? A lot of people say it comes from the Bible. I really don't think so. I really don't think so. I mean, because a lot of the Old Testament is all about, keeping your child's sacrifices up to date and stuff. Otherwise, the Lord is going to get upset. And, making sure that you sacrifice, children and bulls and things like that. I picture the situation. There's a caveman, right? And he's out there hunting animals for food, okay? And one day, there's another caveman appears on the scene. And you've got a caveman and you've got a caveman, you've got the animal between the two. And the animal can't go that way and it can't go that way. Whichever way it goes, it's going to meet its end. So it tries, it gets killed, and then there might be a fight between the two cavemen for the spoils. Okay, that's true, first time. But after a while, common sense will kick in, won't it? Oh, if I stand there and you stand there, and this is a canyon, and the animal is in the middle, if we cooperated, we could make sure that we feed ourselves. So what we do is we'll kill the animal, we'll share the spoils. And then they find that works extremely well. Then a third caveman appears on the scene, and it works even better. Common sense. And then we get groups building up to tribes, clans, tribes, and so on. And then it's still working the same way. Common sense is kicking in all the time. You don't kill the men in your tribe because that tribe over the hill might start to attack you, and you need the men in your tribe to fight beside you. You don't kill the women in your tribe because you need them to bring more men into the tribe. Common sense is kicking in all the time, I believe. Right. How is it made then? How is it made? Now it's been kind of established and documented by the Magna Carta. See, all that common sense built up to aggravation and so on, which culminated in the Magna Carta. I mean, I actually live in London, about 5 miles from Runnymede, where the Magna Carta was signed, as a matter of fact. Not that that's of any particular importance. But how is it made? Well, it's made by the verdicts of juries of 12. I mean, I've specified the 4 basics, but as I'm sure you're well aware, there's a lot of ifs and buts in specific situations, of course. So we do need juries of 12, impartial people, just picked at random, to use their own common sense for specific circumstances. But they hear evidence from both sides, the accused and the accuser, which must be based on first-hand knowledge. Witnesses on the stand are made to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, under penalty of perjury, which means it doesn't stop them from lying, but it does mean, this is why the situation is not 100% perfect, but it does mean that if they're caught out in a lie, they will receive a prison sentence, like various people, some prominent people like Lord Archer, and Jonathan Aitken and people like that. Okay? Yes, they lied when they shouldn't have done, and they did jail time. I mean, in case of Archer, of course, he just wrote a crap book and made a fortune, but that's another story. But the important thing is that information from the witnesses is based on first-hand knowledge. Do you see the person in this court who hit the other person over the head with a lump of 4B2? Yes, it was him, my lord. I saw it with my own eyes. Now, that witness doesn't need to know the name of the accused or the accuser. Might just have been walking down the street and seen an incident. Didn't know either party, but prepared to witness it and prepared to say it was him what done it in court. No names, just knowledge, first-hand knowledge. So that's the first way, juries of 12. The second way, unrebutted statements of truth, affidavits in other words, based on first-hand knowledge and signed under penalty of perjury. So if you write an affidavit and you say it's a statement of truth and you say the information is true, certain and correct, and it's being written under penalty of perjury, that puts you in exactly the same position as if you were in the witness box in a court of law, having sworn on oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if you then write down the truth from your first-hand knowledge, that makes the common law. And there is a way of doing that such that that happens. That is assuming, by the way, that what you write is the truth, in which case it cannot be rebutted. However, there are shades of grey in everything. So what you do is you write it down, you send it to whoever you're accusing, you give them 30 days to rebut what you've said. And if they right back to you saying, with their own statement of truth, by the way, rebutting what you've said, then it's like stalemate. But if you've written down the truth and you really have accused them of some wrong that they've done to you, then they can't rebut it truthfully. So you have now got a common law, what we call lien, or you can create a lien on them. You see, the way it works is there's only one truth in any given situation. There are not two truths. See, one of the things about the BBC, for example, one of the reasons why it can present bullshit after bullshit after bullshit, and I'm sure most people here know that that's what they do. If you think about their charter, the BBC's charter says that they must balance what they say, what they present, what they broadcast. Okay, fine, but if there's only one truth in any given situation, what do you balance one truth with? You haven't got another truth to balance it with. And if it's the truth, it's blatantly obvious, actually. So anything you try and balance it with is likely to be seen pretty immediately as bullshit. So what they generally do is they present lots of bullshit, which is what comes out over the transmitters. And so on. So, okay, let's move on a bit. Oh, how do you know whether or not you're abiding within the common law? You just ask yourself, would a jury of 12 appraised of all the facts, because don't forget, you know what happened, would they agree with me or not? Do I feel my actions are honourable? When we started out a couple of years ago, we would ask ourselves the question, how do you do this officially? Well, how do we do that officially? And I very quickly said, well, hold on a second, that's the wrong question, isn't it? What we should be asking ourselves is, how do we do it honourably? And I talk about that in my book, Noticing People Honourably. Okay, so again, I'll be coming back to this aspect, but let's now sort of go back to what I was talking about, the planet. What is the hierarchy on this planet of ours? Okay? I think, number one, at the top of the tree is the planet itself, I think, because without it, everything depends on it. So it's a dependency tree, isn't it? Underneath that, I put non-sentient life because sentient life relies on non-sentient life in order to feed itself. Underneath the non-sentient life, either the plants and so on, sentient life. Humans, us, all other animals, birds, fish, insect life and so on. And then, of course, the other real entities such as germs, viruses and bacteria. And that's it, isn't it? Isn't that it? No, it's not actually, is there? Because if we think a bit further, we've got a hierarchy that goes lower than that, because we've got all these fictional things, don't we? Fictions. A top fiction being the government or the crown. It's a fiction. Show me the government. Can I touch it? Can I even see it? Can you take a picture of it? Where does it start? Where does it end? Does it include local government? And where does that start? And where does that end? There's no such thing as the government. It's all in our heads. Oh, I work for the government. You mean you think you work for a government? The government, the crown, requires humans, that's at 4, so humans are above them, and humans at 3A need to recognise it. If no one recognised the crown, it would not exist. If no one recognised the crown, it wouldn't exist. The Queen would be what she now is, just another citizen. The reason why she's just a citizen is because she's signed away everything to the European Union, in theory. Of course, she hasn't in reality, because again, the European Union is just a fiction. If you believe in it, it is. If you don't believe in it, it's not. You have a referendum 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the EU. If you choose not to recognise it, it's nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's back to faith. Do we have this idea that the crown is something or not? Okay, that's at 4. What about below than that? Oh, we've got things below that. We've got sub-fiction or role-playing entities, people who play the role of a judge or a magistrate or a lawyer, human beings who take on that role. Got corporations. I've already explained that the legal definition of a person can include a corporation. So you've got that, you've got judges, magistrates, lawyers, solicitors, politicians, policymen, policemen, policymen and bailiffs. Here's another interesting fact about the Magna Carta. It talks about foresters, it talks about justiciars, which is not the same as a judge, by the way. It talks about our barons and earls and lords, and it talks about the monarch, and it talks about constables, sheriffs and bailiffs. The sheriff being the shire reeve and the bailiff being the sheriff's underlings, submen. The idea is the sheriff kept the peace in the shire and the bailiffs took a bailiwick area and kept the peace in the area. That was the job of the bailiff. The sheriff and the bailiffs, their primary job is peacekeepers, believe it or not, which is actually not to knock your door down but to keep the peace. Constables also, their job is to keep the peace. Now, missing from the Magna Carta, therefore missing from the law of the land, therefore missing from the common law, we've got a few people. Judges, magistrates, lawyers, solicitors, politicians and bailiffs. Oh, sorry, no, beg your pardon, bailiffs are in there. And policymen are not, but constables are. And there's a big difference, which I'll try and explain to you. But, so that's very interesting, isn't it? The Magna Carta doesn't have doesn't require, and law does not require, judges, magistrates, lawyers, solicitors and politicians. So what have these people done? Well, over the centuries they've carved a niche for themselves into our psyche and told us how wonderful and professional they are, and yet they're nothing really. And very, very stupid in many cases. And that's easy to discover as soon as you start to write letters to them, because the absolute crap that you get back is unbelievable. You wouldn't believe that human beings could write such garbage. Oh, the stories I could tell you. Which I won't have time for, I'm afraid. I'll try and tell you some, but I haven't got time for them all. You have to do it. And as soon as you do it, oh boy, you find out. Right, but of course, now we've got the situation that the Crown needs to recognise these people via statutes, via legals, but human beings need to recognise the Crown. Yeah? But we've got more than that. We've got members of staff of corporations, which require the corporation to recognise them, which requires the Crown to recognise the corporation, which requires human beings to recognise the Crown. So, as a human being, just a human being, not playing any roles, not acting, you're just you, being you, you sit at 3A. A member of staff is at 6 in the hierarchy. For heaven's sake, even germs reside at 3C in the hierarchy. But it's worse than that actually for judges and so on, because everything, and this was one of the first things we discovered, everything is corporations. The Ministry of Justice is a corporation. Parliament, members of Parliament, is a corporation. Queen Elizabeth II is a corporation. The United Kingdom PLC is a corporation with a board of directors, with shareholders, trading at a profit. It's just recently been announced that Devon and Cornwall police are owned by IBM. Devon and Cornwall police are owned by IBM. Think about it. Devon and Cornwall police have as much authority as a security guard at Tesco's. And the Metropolitan Police are at the same level. They're just a company. But of course, the boys in blue don't realise how low they are and how little authority they've actually got. But we're seriously working on that, trust me. As a human being, you are sovereign. You are sovereign. Your flesh and blood, your spirit is sovereign. Which is why, for example, rape is such a horrendous thing. But, I mean, there's different kinds of rape. We know about, rape of women, rape, violating a woman. There's other kinds of rape. There's an awful lot of mind rape that goes on. And that goes on, that's raping everyone's mind. All the time. When a policeman stops you and says, "What's your name?" He's raping you. Whether you're a male or female, he's raping you. And when you say, "Excuse me, officer, why have you stopped me?" And he goes, "Right, have you?" And they do, and it's happened. And they handcuff you. And they throw you into a police van. And they take you down, male or female. Look at the website. Look what happened to my systems admin, Woodman. Driving down the road, they kettled him 3 ways in his car. Excuse me, he got out, he went over to the policeman on the pavement and said, "Excuse me, officer, can I ask you why you've stopped me?" That's all he said. He got grabbed, he got handcuffed, he got slung in a police van, he got taken down the station, strip searched, DNA taken, held for 4 hours. Excuse me, charged with a public order offence. That was Liverpool, heightened in Liverpool. As a sovereign, as a human being, you are sovereign. They had absolutely no right to do that to him. That was a complete trespass on his sovereignty. It's very important. A society. We talk about our society. Okay, we live in a society, don't we? What is a society? Never thought that? There is a definition. It's a pretty good one, actually. It's a group of like-minded people who come together to deliberate, determine and act towards common goals. Act towards common goals. Acts of Parliament. Acts of Parliament. A bill is placed in front of Parliament, they vote on it, it goes back and forth between Commons and the Lords and so on, and it becomes an act, doesn't it? It goes up, supposed to go up to the Queen for royal assent to become a statute. Acts. Act towards common goals. Okay, now how do these like-minded people know whether or not they're like-minded? Well, they inspect the published common goals. So you all live in a society, don't you? Because you believe you do, you've been told you do. Our society. Where were the common goals published? When did you see them? When did you read them? What are the common goals of our society that we live in? I've never seen any published common goals. So I don't know if I'm like-minded. I don't know if I want to be a member of our society, the one that they always talk about. And what is a group of like-minded people? It's a membership. Now we're simplifying what this means, aren't we? A membership. A society has members. And they join of their own free will. They inspect the published common goals and they decide, I agree with that, so I'd like to be a member of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Birds, or the RSPCA, or the Law Society, or even the Halifax Building Society, or whatever society. I agree enough about this society, I'd like to join it, I'd like to contribute, because I've seen what it does. But what happens after a period of time, if a member decides that the direction the society has subsequently taken, they can no longer agree with it. Hang on a second, I don't like the way this society is going. Oh, what can I do? Resign is what you can do without recriminations. Now the point is that only of your own free will can you join a society, and no one has the right to join you. So when a policeman asks you your name and you say, I haven't got one, and he says everyone has got one, he's talking about the society. Excuse me. He's talking about the society. Oh, I'm so sorry. But by asking you your name, we've had the situation where when somebody said, I haven't got a name, he said, well, I'll give you one. Oh, yeah, and a date of birth to somebody. Fundamentally, nobody has the right to assign a name to you. This is what you get in court. Are you, Mr. Smith? No, that's not my name. Well, I think you are, Mr. Smith. We'll say the judge or the magistrate. Well, sorry, are you my mother or are you God, So what right have you got to assume my name? Well, the reason why they have to assume your name is because they can't proceed unless they proceed against your name. Anyway, so that's a society. Now let's talk about a statute. A statute is a legislated rule of a society. I'll finish at the end of this screen. All legals deliberated, determined and acted upon, that's acts, isn't it, of Parliament, by the legislative body, which is the legislative body of this society is Parliament. This society, the one that no one here, I think, has made an application to join. Well, I certainly haven't. So a statute is a legislated rule of our society. Members consent to these rules by joining. When did you join our society? When did you join the society for which Parliament is making statutes? Did you look at the common goals? Did you agree with them? When did you join? You see, members consent to these rules by joining. So when did you give your consent to be fined for doing 35 in a 30 limit is the point in practice. You didn't. Non-members are unaffected. And if you didn't join the society, then you're not affected by a 30 limit. Now, you are affected by your responsibility. But I'll give you an example. Around my way, there are schools. And there are humps outside the school, and there are 20-mile-an-hour limits around, the area of the school. And when the kids are going to school and when they're coming out, even 20 is actually quite dangerous. Okay? Yes, so acting responsibly, you would really take it easy when the kids are going to school and when they're coming out. But the rest of the day and night, it's just a bit of road. So why has it got humps there and why has it got 20 limit? What we need are responsible people who know how to drive and go, oh, the kids are coming out, I better take it easy. We need to act responsibly at all times. And then we don't need humps and 20 limits, is my contention. To think about this in another way, your doctor does not need to obey the legislative rules, in other words, the statutes, of the Law Society. Do you obey the statutes of the Law Society, doctor? Don't be bloody stupid, I'm your doctor. But I do accept the statutes of the British Medical Association, and I have taken a Hippocratic oath. Your lawyer, your solicitor, does not need to obey the Hippocratic oath and the legislative rules and the statutes of the British Medical Association. But he does need to obey the statutes of the Law Society, which are different. Your postman does not need to obey either sets of legislative rules, but in fact your postman has got rules of his own. For example, he's supposed to put the post through the letterbox of the address. And even if you know the postman, you're still not supposed to hand them to you if you're walking out and saying, oh, is there any posts for me? He's supposed to put them through, the letterbox. I presume if he's your brother or your sister or somebody, they might, just, yeah, okay, here's yours, But, see, it's the interesting thing about postmen, though. I'm not knocking postmen, we say they do a good job and they do it in all weathers and all that sort of thing. But if you think about it these days, okay, with emails, with phones, with cars, most people keep in touch with their friends and associates by email, by phoning them, or by going round to see them, or meeting them down the pub. Very few people these days keep in touch, loving touch, with their friends and family by letter. All right, Christmas cards and birthday cards, yes. But, most of the mail that the post office puts through your letterbox is either, junk mail in many cases, or because they now deliver junk mail, don't they? Or bills, So with all due respect, a large chunk of what they do is actually giving you a certain amount of misery. Okay, did you consent to become a member of the Society's legislative rules, your Parliament and Congress Acts? When was that? Parliamentary congressional statutes are nothing more than company policy, because they're a company and they're making their own company rules. The Ministry of Justice Corporation, actually, to be exact, is the company for the statutes in this country. And that's why we use the term policymen to refer to enforcers of company policy. They are just, they call themselves the police, we call them, or policemen, we call them policymen, because all they're doing is enforcing the company, most of the time, is enforcing the company policy on non-members. Because I didn't consent. And if they actually asked me, I wouldn't consent. About 2 weeks before the general election, the Conservatives put up on their website, they said, we are offering a contract with the British people. And they wrote down the contract they were offering, which was complete bullshit, because all they were offering is the political system as it stood. You vote us in and we'll give you all the shite you had before, fundamentally. But they actually did say, we're offering you a contract. Well, as soon as they used that word, we were off and running, because all we did was we wrote a letter to David Cameron. We wrote one together, but a few of us sent it. Dear Mr. Cameron, we understand that you're offering me you're offering me a contract, according to your website, just to let you know that if you become Prime Minister, I do not accept your contract. Therefore, you will not be my Prime Minister. Yours sincerely, without ill will, vexation or frivolity. And we sent them up. Obviously, we didn't get a reply. But, it's now on writing that David Cameron's not my Prime Minister, and he's got a letter to prove it. Rather stupid of them, actually, to offer that contract. It was obviously a PR stunt, and it kind of backfired. I think I'm prepared to stop there if you wish to take a break. And everybody wishes to take a break, I'm sure you... Right, what does it say under Bank of England? Now obviously you can't see that on the screen, but I think it's possible that maybe some people have noticed what it says under the Bank of England. I'm sure you all recognise that as a picture of a £10 note. And under the words Bank of England, it actually says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10. So I'm back on money now, aren't I? Now the question I have for you, please put your hand up if you have ever seen, touched, felt, held or heard a sum of £10. But keep your hand down if you've only ever seen notes like that promising it. So that's interesting, isn't it? That's just like everywhere else I've been, and every time I ask that question, we've seen notes promising a sum of £10. We've seen them promising a sum of £5 and a sum of 20, I'm sure, and maybe even a sum of 50 and so on. But we've never actually seen the sum itself. That, by the way, was a thing known as a promissory note because it had a promise on it. Okay, it's an IOU from the Bank of England. Gosh, just think how many sums of £10 the Bank of England has agreed it owes, which it never actually pays. It's promising the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, actually. Because we've already seen that money is only faith placed in something. It's a deception. If it said, I promise to pay the bearer on demand 10 unicorns, it would amount to the same thing. But then when you read that, if you bothered to read it, you'd go, what's the good of 10 unicorns? It's promising you the same thing. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because that's all it can ever promise you. I mean, you can say, well, in the past, it would be a certain amount of gold or silver. Oh yeah, okay, fine. All right, super, wonderful, marvellous. What is a chunk of gold or silver? Well, it's pretty. But it's not money. It's just a lump of metal. Useful. But then paper's useful. Money doesn't exist. It's an illusion. Do we need it? That's the question. Now here's something very interesting. Veronica says money's an illusion. Oh, Veronica's a nutcase. Conspiracy theorist. Oh, but hold on a second. So does the Bank of England. It says the same thing as Veronica. Now, I must admit, I worked out that money was an illusion back in the 1980s, funnily enough. And I started to explain to people and they weren't interested. Now people are interested. The first quarterly bulletin from the Bank of England in 2008. Does anybody remember what happened at the end of 2008? Who said that? Who's me? Is this somebody over here? Oh yes, I can see your hand up. What happened at the end of 2008?
On September the 15th, the economy of the Western world took a nosedive.
Yes.
And immediately afterwards, a load of people were scuttling around like headless chickens.
Headless chickens, yes.
Trying to pretend that they didn't understand what had happened.
Yes. And what did it result in? Begins with B.
Well, borrowing a huge amount of money from everybody else.
How about bailouts? Is that the word you're looking for?
That's a good
bank bailouts, could it be? Right, so at the end of 2008 we had all the furore, at which the gentleman's just been talking about. All the acres and acres and acres and acres of newsprint. We had all the pundits on the TV yakking away to their heart's content about the bank bailouts at the end of 2008. I think it was about October, I seem to remember. At the beginning of 2008, the first quarterly bulletin, page 103, it's a PDF and anybody can download it. So it's a PDF, page 105, bottom left paragraph. It says, banks extend credit, money, by simply increasing the borrowing customer's current account, which may be paid away to wherever the borrower wants, by the bank writing a cheque on itself. That is, banks extend credit by creating money. Now, in the PDF, it's not in italics, and it's not underlined, where I've underlined it. Apart from that, that's a direct quote. Let's think about what that says. Banks extend credit, money, by simply increasing the borrower's customer's current account. Borrowing customer. Hang on. How can you be borrowing if all they're doing is writing a cheque on itself and extending credit by creating money? If they had the money, then you could borrow it. But they're saying that they just create it for you. Read it. That's what it's saying. Of course, it's nicely spun, but read it. The translation, money is created out of thin air by means of human signature. I say human, they say borrowing customer. I guess that includes the bank. Money's created out of thin air. I guess that includes the Bank of England. It's all it's ever done since 1694. It's to promise the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So what is all that acres of newsprint about? And what was all that media pundit rubbish about? All the banks did was write a few more cheques on themselves. If you don't pay a demand, a court de facto, most courts, will consider you to be depriving whoever makes the demand. Oh, you haven't paid this back, you have deprived the bank. We've already seen that money, legalese, religion and politics are the same thing, they're faith placed in something. Can you deprive someone of their beliefs? Now, you can persuade them that their beliefs are wrong and get them to agree that you're right. But deprive means just take their beliefs away. You can't take someone's belief away just like that. It's not possible. So how can you deprive someone of their money belief? I mean, you can't, as I say, you can't. It's not easy to deprive a Jesus freak of their belief in Jesus, and I have tried. You can't deprive someone of a belief. And money is a belief. The bank believes you owe them money. The signature, the mark made by a human being, that starts the money out of thin air creation process. Now, along with the date and an amount, it creates an IOU, a promissory note. Now, here, you've got a promise, you've got a signature, if you look closely, and the date says when the bearer demands it. In other words, it's an open date. All you have to do is to go to the Bank of England with one of these and say, here you are, here's your promissory note, I want my sum of £10. That's all you have to do. And they will then frog march you outside, lock the doors and call the police. Because there's no such thing as a sum of £10. You're welcome to try. Financial institutions will take a promissory note and upon successful completion of credit checks will monetize it, which comprises typing numbers into a computer database these days, or formally writing numbers into a ledger. That's exactly what they said in the Bank of England's quarterly bulletin. They update the borrowing customer's account. It's not really a borrowing customer because they just create an account by typing numbers into the database and say that's for you to use because you've signed for it. You try getting anything without signing for it. When you're signing for something, you are saying, I'm prepared to be an energy unit to work my socks off. And they'll go, OK, fine, if you're prepared to work your socks off, you can have this, that and the other. That's the way the system is working. But I'm going to synchronise on mortgages. The title, or mortgage deed, which it's called one or the other, but it means the same thing. The title of the mortgage deed is the thing you sign, the piece of paper you sign when you take out a mortgage. Plus the mortgage acceptance pages, which are pages associated with it which contain all the numbers. The mortgage deed, the title deed, and the mortgage acceptance pages comprise a promissory note, which must, and I'll explain why that must be, pay in full for the property right at the start of the purchasing via a mortgage process. Now, you're going to say, well, OK, it's a promissory note that I've signed. And it's not worth anything. We'll come on to that. Because I want to go through mortgages in more detail. And I want to explain why I can make that statement. Mortgages are one of the biggest scams of all time. The mortgage deed is your authorisation. The thing you sign is you are signing authorisation to hand possession of something you fully own to some other entity. The land registry will accept this authorisation and will lodge the charge against the property. Can you authorise possession to someone else of something you do not yourself own? Can you give something to someone that belongs to someone else? Do you have the right to come up? I got this out of my purse. Do you have the right to come up, take it away from me and give it to someone? You know full well you don't. I do, because it's mine. But you don't. What about my glasses? Do you have the right to come up and take these and give them to somebody here? You don't. I do. If somebody said to me, I want your glasses, Veronica, I would say you can't have them. I would say they probably won't fit you. But if they really did and someone was desperate, I might give them away and get some more. But I can do that. You can't, because they belong to me. You never have the right to give someone else something you don't possess. In the case of a joint holder, you have to get both signatures when you're taking out a mortgage, because that's you have together you own the property, yeah, but you must fully own it. Nothing will happen until you sign the mortgage deed when you're applying for a mortgage. But you are told not to date it. Not to date it. If you do date it and send it back, they'll only tip-ex it out and write a different date in. Because it's not a valid promissory note. You've signed it, the amounts are on the mortgage acceptance pages, but it isn't dated. So it's not a valid promissory note as you send it back. And in that way, they couldn't use it to place a charge on the land registry because that would be fraudulent. But they've got your signature. They've got your signature. And a blank date box. And all they have to do is to write a date in, and now it becomes a valid promissory note. And the amount is the amount of the mortgage. 200 grand, 150 grand, 100 grand. So together, that's a promissory note in that amount, which buys the property outright. They can then see that you've signed it, so they now have you by the short and curlies, and they can then type the 150 grand into a database, as the Bank of England says that's what they do. Then, once they've typed that into the database, they can go, now it's valid. That property, that money goes into the database and it goes out to the purchaser via solicitors, exchange of contracts. Then they can date the document that you signed. Now it becomes the promissory note, and now they can send it up to the land registry to place the charge on your property to make you pay the monthly repayments. But hold on a second. That's only a valid promissory note if you are the full owner. And if you are the full owner, why are you authorising somebody to put a charge on your property? And why are you making monthly repayments? Oh, it's a scam! That's the reason. It's a scam. What would be fair would be to pay the financial institution, the building society, a reasonable fee, a couple of grand, for the facility of monetising your promissory note. Here, have 2 grand, thanks for doing that. And then you go, that's fine, you're in your home, you bought it from whoever. Don't forget, money is an illusion. Any so-called debt, any debt, if all else fails, get some Tesco value paper, a ream for £4.50 and write promissory notes. Put a spirograph graphic around the edges, make it look a bit pretty. Okay, write the amount in words and numbers. For the date you can say, on the date that a sum paid by the Bank of England to the bearer on demand is shown to have taken place in real terms. When they produce a sum of £10, I'll produce a sum of £10. Get it notarised, costs you 4 of these or 5 of these. By signing it in front of a notary public, what's that doing? The notary public will look for identification. You'll have to take your passport, driving licence or whatever, even though your birth certificate, passport and driving licence say very clearly not to be used for identification purposes. But maybe be that as it may, they will then say you are you, and you sign it and they go, you signed it. Nobody else signed it, it was you that signed it. That's notarising. The statutory definition of a promissory note is cash. It has to be to make that cash. All right? 93% of all money is on computer databases. 7% is cash, that kind of stuff, or the coins, the metal. That's why the metal and the bits of paper are not money, because 93% of it is only on computer databases floating around the world. These days used to be on ledgers, written into ledgers before computers. The statutory definition of a promissory note is cash. It has to be in order to make that cash. The Bills of Exchange Act 1882 says if payment is tendered but is rejected, the debt no longer exists. So if you write one of your own promissory notes, one of your own IOUs, and you offer it, and they say, I'm not taking that, okay, that's fine. No debt exists then, according to the Bills of Exchange Act 1882. I don't owe you anything, that's fine by me. Cheerio, kiss my ass. Okay? Can we get away with it? That's not the point. People outside the freedom movement, all of them, say we're scroungers and so on. And people actually inside the freedom movement think that we can get money this way, because they haven't got it that money's an illusion. They think we're trying to get away with something. We are not trying to get away with anything. What we are trying to do is to prevent them from getting away with blackmails, extortions, frauds and deceptions. And when you create a promissory note and offer it, okay, you're bringing that deception right to the top of the tree. You want money from me? Here's a promissory note. But it's worthless. Yes, but then so is this, because this is only offering the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And the Bank of England have said so. The court system. That's probably the end of money at the moment. If I haven't made it obvious to you, then I'm not sure how else I could do it. I do. There's a whole chapter in my book on it. In fact, there's a chapter called Money, and there's right at the end, there's a chapter called Mind Control and Enslavement. One other thing I will say, which isn't in here and isn't in the book, of course, one other interesting aspect about money is the government can charter the Bank of England to create money. Right? If the government can do that, which they do, what happens is the government create bonds, they offer them to the Bank of England, the Bank of England then pay money across to the government or make loans to the government, which have to be paid back with interest. Right? So in other words, we've got government here, Bank of England here, government wants money, goes to Bank of England, says give us some money, Bank of England says yes, how much do you want, have it, don't forget you've got to pay it back to us with interest. Oh, that's all right, says the government, we'll get it from the taxpayers. Various ways. Now, if the government can charter the Bank of England to create money, why can't it do it itself? Why can the government not just simply create the money itself? Then it wouldn't have to borrow it, and it wouldn't have to pay it back, would it? Would it? Why would it want to pay itself back? So when people who are standing up against council tax are criticised by people who say, well, how would local services be paid? The answer is very simple. For the government to stop chartering the Bank of England, to make its money itself and give it to the local council to run services if you want to keep a monetary system going. Now, Abraham Lincoln instituted that system in the United States. He created what are called greenbacks. What happened to Abraham Lincoln? JFK had created executive orders to put that system into the United States. What happened to JFK? Andrew Jackson, another American president, sometimes known as Old Hickory, fought against the banks tooth and nail. Now, he was not actually assassinated, but attempts were made on his life towards the end of his term of office. So he did actually live out his term of office, because they missed, basically. They didn't live out his term of office. And subsequently, after he left office and another president came in, the banks got their way. But the point is that the system has been tried, it does work. But it's kind of terminal for whoever's in power, you know, whoever's president or whatever. Which proves it works, actually, because they don't assassinate, the banksters don't assassinate you for no reason. So, yes, so, very simply, the answer is, how would services be paid for? Well, because the government could just create the money and issue it to pay for services. Pay for road tax, pay for car insurance, pay for TV licensing, pay for anything. I mean, after all, just think about it. Say it in my book, HM, Revenue and Customs, collect income tax these days. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Okay? And who is responsible for determining fiscal policy and allowing the Bank of England the freedom to create money? HM, Treasury. Well, if HM Revenue and Customs want money, why can't they go to HM Treasury and get HM Treasury to organise some money for them? Why do they have to bother you and I? They don't, actually, in reality. But of course, if they don't bother you and I, what would happen? Oh, you'd be free to do anything you liked. You'd be free to work or not, and to work at what you wanted to work at, without having to go to work to earn a certain amount of money in order to live. You could actually, if you wished, go and lay on the beach, if that was your bag. Or you could stay at home and write poetry, you could play guitar, you could paint, you could go out and start a forest, you could plough a field, you could do whatever you were good at. But no, I've got to keep going to this particular job. I don't like the job, I hate the people I work for, but it earns the money. Because the money comes down from the source, the banks, down to you, and they take a bit from you. So it goes back up to Revenue and Customs. But it could go straight between one and the other if they really wanted a monetary system. It's designed that way to keep you under control. It explains it all in my book. The court system, chock full of problems, largely because people do not know the roles that judges and magistrates have agreed to play via their solemnly sworn oaths of office. Added to this, the fact that grand juries were abolished in 1931. I reckon the system is fundamentally flawed, just like the parliamentary system, and it's irretrievably broken, such that tinkering with it only makes things worse as far as true, honourable, real, unbiased justice is concerned. The solutions I propose, or I suggest, are to bring judges back to their oaths of office and don't let them extend their so-called authority past this oath. This would limit them solely to running courts de jure, and no further statutes will be required. EC regulations would also be redundant. When running a court de jure, the judge sits there, you have a jury, you have the accused, you have the accuser. And you have witnesses. And the witnesses are asked questions. And the judge's job is to hear objections. Objection, leading the witness. Objection overruled, objection sustained. The job of the judge is to make sure that only first-hand real evidence is presented to the jury. That's the job of a judge, beginning, middle and end. An umpire, in other words. Abolish magistrates and reconvene grand juries. Abolish politics, religion, legalism, money, especially money which takes all the others with it into the dustbin of history. What will we do without money? Live is the answer. We would discover that laying on the beach and doing nothing, after a while we'd get bored and we'd find something to do, find something productive to do. The only reward I need is not money. I mean, I have to use a certain amount of it because money is still the king. Without money I can't buy bread, whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, the only reward I need is the fact that I get respect because I am trying to contribute to humanity and mankind as a whole in a positive way. And that's the only reward I really need, and that's the reward I'm tending to get. And I suggest that's the only reward anybody needs, really. And if you don't contribute, and most people are, you won't get respect. And if you don't get respect, you'll get your shit together and start doing something that earns respect. I believe. And I believe that we could do away with money today. There would be a bit of a panic for a few months, perhaps a couple of months, 3 months at most. And then people would start to realise, well, hang on a second, if I did what I used to do, because I'm good at it, I know how to do it, why don't I just go out and do it? Drive a truck. Or whatever, you know. Mill some bread, mill some flour, bake some bread, or whatever, make some cakes or whatever. Run an eatery, run a cafe. People just walk in, sit down, I make them a cup of coffee. If I want coffee, I go to the cash and carry and I just take it off the shelf. And it gets filled up with people who are doing the job of filling up the shelves before, manufacturing coffee and doing it, because there's no money, nobody gets paid. But the point is this, that the people who run this planet, the global elite, the Zionists, the Rothschilds, the Freemasons, suddenly all the numbers in their bank account mean nothing. All the numbers in their bank account mean nothing. So they are brought down to the same level as us. Suitably enlightened, we could establish sovereign republics for England, Wales and Scotland and possibly Northern Ireland. However, it might be better to give it back to the Irish. After all, it is theirs. And of course, Ira, the Southern Ireland, is the only sovereign republic on the planet. What does sovereign mean? It means every Irishman and every Irish woman are declared by their constitution to be sovereign. And what does sovereignty mean? Well, it means that your consent for anything other than common law, your consent is always needed for it to apply to you. So, for example, if you have a government and they propose something, if you don't vote for it or you vote no, it doesn't apply to you. Only those who said yes, it applies to. You might say, well, it'd be difficult to govern under those circumstances. That's the point. That's exactly the point. Common law still applies, whether you're, whether you're sovereign or not. You still need to accept living in peace. Okay, how do you bring a judge back to your oath of office? Well, you remind them of it. Now, I've now reached a few screens which I'm going to some extent skip through, because certain things have happened in the last few weeks which mean that we've gone past these stages. We've taken steps past them. So I'm just going to probably click onto the next screen. I mean, the answer is still right. The first answer is still right. Oh, sorry, the second bit's still right. But how do you bring a judge back to their oath of office? By reminding them of it, by asking up front before answering any questions whatsoever, are you prepared to act under your oath of office at this time? The reason is because I want to explain the judge's oaths of office. A judge takes two. A magistrate only takes the second one. It's exactly the same, and where it's got here, that blank, if it was a judge's office, it would say judge. If it was a magistrate, it would say magistrate. But apart from that, it's the same. But the judge takes two. He takes the first one. I do swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. Not according to legal, according to law. Because that is an oath based on the common law. And the second one, it also means that if he's bearing true allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II, he's bound by the Queen's coronation oath. Now, what was the coronation? What was the coronation? This person, well, according to David Icke, this reptile, walked into Westminster Abbey in 1953 as the eldest daughter of the late king. A guy walked around in a kind of a Father Christmas outfit and asked her questions, and she solemnly swore to do some things, and then she walked out the sovereign Queen of England. It was actually a binding contract that was established between this reptile and the British people, where we gave her certain royal prerogatives, and in return we expected her to protect us, using her position as sovereign to protect us. Now, as we know, she has reneged on every promise she ever made. That's a question for another day, but the fact is she did swear it under God, so help me God. So when a judge swears an oath to her, through that, he's swearing an oath under God, so help me God. Oh, here's an interesting one, isn't it? Going off a slight tangent. General election. Lots of people put their name down as candidates for constituencies, and they go around, kissing babies' bums and glad-handing and all that kind of thing, and promising the earth to the people in the constituency. And then come polling day, people troop down the pissing rain and put their X against the candidate of their choice. And in the evening, some very dedicated people collect up all the ballot boxes, and very dedicated people count them to try and get an accurate count. And the person who's got the most votes is declared the the member for that constituency by the returning officer. Okay? All right, fine, so far. And then comes the opening of Parliament, and the member goes down to London for the opening of Parliament. And what's the first thing he does? Apart from a few tots in the bar and stuff. What's the first thing he does? He swears allegiance to all those poor sods who went down in the pissing rain and put the X against his name. No, he doesn't. He swears allegiance to the Queen. Sod those people that he promised the earth to. He swears allegiance to the Queen. He can't take his seat in the House of Commons until he has sworn allegiance to the Queen. So from then on, whose business is he doing as he sits in the House of Commons? Is he doing the business of the constituents, or is he doing the business of the Queen? What do you think? And does that explain quite a lot? I think it does. Coming back to the second oath, which is the most important one, and this is the same for magistrates. I do swear by Almighty God that I will well and truly serve our Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II in the office of Judge Magistrate. And I will do right to all manner of people, after the laws and usages of this realm, without fear or favour, affectation of ill will. Now, I told you earlier on that under legal, the word person could be a corporation. And you might say, well, people, of course, is the plural. No, it's not. The plural of person is persons. It's just person with an S on the end. Okay? And people hasn't been bastardised by legalese. So people means what you think it means. That's you lot and me lot. So when that judge is swearing to do right by all manner of people, that magistrate is to do right by all manner of people, he is not saying he will do all right by, you know, Scottish Power or N-Power or, you know, West Wales Water or whatever utility company or whatever local council. He is supposed to do all right by you. He said so, which is why it's very important that he is acting under his oath of office when he makes any decision, because he should make it in your favour, because he is sworn to do all right to all manner of people, and I suggest you are all manner of people sitting here. He's bound to do right by humans. But the problem is very simple, that when you get to a court, they do all right by the utility company or the local council, because they're not acting under their oath of office at the time. They take an oath to become a judge or to become a magistrate, but they are, when they're out on the golf course, they're not under their oath of office. When they're in the supermarket, they're not under their oath of office. They're only supposed to be under their oath of office in the context of a court. As soon as they sit in court at the top, you know, above everybody else, then they are supposed to take on what that oath says. But if they don't do that, that's how they make the decisions that they make. And rubber stamp all kinds of crap, no matter what you may say to them. Judges don't even hear civil disputes in courtrooms. Civil disputes, that's the vast majority of hearings, for example, mortgage hearings or banks claiming you haven't paid an overdraft or whatever. They take place in the smallest room, which is actually the judge's chamber that they rent for the day. But they don't tell you that. Everybody will call it a court. The usher sitting outside will talk about, oh, you need to go into court now. Deception, deception, deception. Even the court rules, and there are court rules, but not that they apply them anyway, even in a court, but whatever, there are court rules. They don't apply in a judge's chambers because a table at McDonald's will do just as well. Neither side is required to take an oath, which would have to happen in a court. All evidence presented against you is hearsay, and the so-called judge will accept it, even if it is illegible. I have seen a piece of paper handed to a judge. It was so badly photocopied, it looked like rain. Just dashes all the way down. Can you read this then? Oh yes, I can read that. We did miss a trick, because we should have said, well, read some of it then. But okay, magistrates are saying, back to the oath of office. I'm going to skip through a lot of those. That is the same as the second judge's oath, etc. Now, I want to just stop on this one. Oaths, be very careful, don't be fobbed off. Asking a judge or magistrate if they have taken an oath is absurd. Of course they have. By the way, sorry, this business about oaths of office is the most crucial thing to do with courts. And everything that's happened in the last few weeks has hung on it. And I'm hoping to get to explain that. Asking a judge or magistrate if they have taken an oath is absurd. Of course they have. Asking the court service if judges and magistrates take oaths is absurd. Of course they do. To say, of course they do, is one of the major ways they like to use in order to fob you off. Because those are not the questions. The question is, are they acting under it at the time of the hearing, of listening to you, of considering and making an order? That's the question. Very simply because if they were, they could never do what they intend to do and do every single time, namely to find in favour of a mindless, soulless, corrupt, e.g. social services, compassionless, incompetent, often to the point of imbecilic, e.g. Department of Work and Pensions, Department of the Environment, DVLA, etc. Corporation, which these people are, these departments are just corporations, based entirely on computerised hearsay evidence. And garbage out is garbage in is the first law of computing. That's a law. You put garbage in, it will come out garbage. That same garbage will come out. The computer doesn't. If you put a lie in, the lie will come out. The computer doesn't convert it to the truth. We'll find in favour of that, as opposed to first-hand knowledge directly from the mind recall of a human being who knows exactly what happened and will swear to it on penalty of perjury. You can try as much as you like offering them first-hand knowledge under penalty of perjury, and they don't want to know. All they want to do is to find in favour of the mindless, soulless, corrupt corporation. Fact. Stone's Justice's Manual, section 1382. Stone's Justice's Manual is one of those. It comes in 3 massive tomes and they carry it into court. This defines the jurisdiction of a magistrate's court. A, B, C and D. If you look in, they're all offences. Summary offence, offence committed, summary any offence, summary offence, indictable offence and so on. Now it's magistrates' court that hear council tax liability hearings. Now a liability hearing is where they are trying to assess whether you are liable to pay the council tax. No offence has been committed. If they decide that you are not liable, oh boy, that's very rare, but supposing you've got council tax benefit. So you're not liable to pay the council tax. And, you know, that doesn't stop the council from summoning you. You can tell them, I've got council tax benefit. They can still summons you. In fact, one of the first things that we got involved in a couple of years ago was where somebody was on council tax benefit and he was still being summoned to pay his council tax. He did go into court and point that out, and they said, oh no, well, you don't pay the council tax, you're not liable. And he walked out, and that was it. He hadn't committed any offence. If they find you liable, which is general, you still haven't committed an offence because you could then just pay it. Then you wouldn't have committed any offence at all. Only if they find you liable and then you don't pay it, then, in their eyes, there's an offence. But at the liability hearing, there's no offence. So magistrates' courts don't even have jurisdiction to hear liability hearings. What are magistrates anyway? They're a cost-cutting attempt to provide the functionality of a grand jury and to dispense so-called justice on the cheap and not cheerful. But grand juries do not decide the outcome. They only decide whether or not a prima facie case has been made such that a full trial is warranted. That's what a grand jury does. It doesn't operate in a court. A grand jury can be like 20 to 30 people who are a group of people who do the job of voluntarily of receiving complaints with powers to demand any information so that they can look at the complaint and say whether or not there's a case to be made. It's something that the Crown Prosecution Service tend to have taken over. Well, it's now split between magistrates and the CPS. because grand juries were abolished in 1931. I say bring them back. If a full trial is warranted at the trial jury, the jury of 12, would decide the outcome, guilty or not guilty, as still happens today. Magistrates attempt to be a jury of 3, which is nothing like good enough for even basic justice, and simply provides the opportunity for up to 3 would-be tyrants to perform their sadistic pleasures. And they do like doing it. You are not alone. What have we got here? We've got a few emails. It's hard to read, so I'll just point out the salient things. A guy called Bob, who called himself John for anonymity, wrote to the Magistrates Association and he said, do magistrates take an oath? Wrong question, we've already been through that, but that was the question he asked. And someone called, right at the top, called Leora Ronell, wrote back saying, yes, they do, and she quoted the oath. And she copied a colleague called Barbara Tetty. Now, by accident or by design, we don't know, but in her response to John or Bob or whatever he is called, she included a little bit of internal email, which is this bit down the bottom, which is from Barbara Tetty, who was copied on the eventual reply. What happened is Leonora Ronell copied this question that she'd received from John to Barbara Tetty, who is a records administrator. And Barbara Tetty replies, and another ... That's not the first time they've been asked that question, and it's getting regular. They've had it quite a few times. So you're not alone. Right, now we've got to court procedure based on Birkenhead and Hereford, etc. Okay, I suppose I'd better explain Birkenhead. I know obviously Vince was there, and I think some others were there as well. I mean, you were there, weren't you, and so on. How many people were at Birkenhead? Okay, fine. So now, how many of you know about Birkenhead? Oh, okay, good. Right, so you've seen the YouTubes when they were still up? Okay, fine. What happened there was a great crowd and a lot of furore in the court in terms of noise and so on. And a few people, a couple were arrested, although they shouldn't have been, and so on. Fundamentally, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, in Birkenhead, what was it, about 4 weeks ago? It was the 28th of March, wasn't it? The judge was threatened with arrest. Well, he was arrested, actually, a citizen's arrest. And then the police rescued him. The police rescued the judge, which was wrong of them. Because what they did was they made an instant decision that the judge was obviously innocent because he was a judge. And instead of carrying through the citizen's arrest by taking the judge into safe custody and processing the charges against the judge, they actually arrested the people who were trying to arrest the judge. And the saga of that still goes on. But the point is that in rescuing the judge, what the police did is they made themselves accomplices to any corruption that the judge was involved in actual fact. Which was rather silly of them, but they'll find out in the future, I think, or we hope anyway. But the point is that the mistake they made, the fundamental mistake they made, was to judge the judge to be innocent. And that's a fundamental mistake for the very simple reason it's not the policeman's job to judge people's guilt or innocence. The policeman's job is to arrest people, caution them, and charge them, and that's it. Because innocence and guilt is the function of courts, and only the function of courts. It is not the function of the police, and never has been. So they were wrong not to assist the arrest. If someone is not called a judge, a politician or a magistrate, then they're perfectly happy to feel their collar, arrest them, charge them, and arrest them, caution them, and charge them. It's just that if the person is called judge, magistrate or politician, they just wet themselves. Oh no, can't do it to him. But that's their mentality. But it is changing. It is changing. Because when we come to Hereford, not the Monday just gone, but the Monday before, was it the, was it the 4th of April? We instituted my plan, not Roger Hayes' plan. And this is my plan. And we went into court, magistrates' court, on that Monday, a small group of us, no furore, no panic, no black umbrellas, we just went in. But we knew what we were going to do, and we did it. And we told the magistrates if they did not dismiss the case, they would be arrested. And they dismissed the case. There were 2 police in court, and we got them to agree, because it was what I've just explained to you was explained to them very carefully and very quietly. And we got them to agree that if the arrest was to happen, they would do it, because that would be their job. The procedure we used was this one, more or less. We were actually, we did have a certain amount of how can I put it, there were certain bonus things involved, and I don't really know if I can spend the time to explain all that, but we used this procedure. A small, dedicated, disciplined, peaceful group, 10 or so. There were actually 9 of us in Hereford. Absolutely no more than 20. You don't want a crowd. One is a negotiator. That's my term. Someone who understands the situation inside out and is prepared to negotiate with the policy men. It could be whoever is actually summoned, or it could be one of the other people. No one else in the group ever speaks, except inadvertently we all went no at one point in Hereford. It was just like, no! That was it. We then realised that no, we shouldn't have spoken. But they always do whatever the negotiator requests, quietly, calmly, peacefully, never giving the police any opportunity to grab and handcuff and all that rubbish. When the judge or magistrates are told they are under citizen's arrest for not acknowledging their oath of office, are you acting under your oath of office? Oh, I've been a judge for 12 years. No, that's not the question. Are you acting under your oath of office at this time? This is a properly convened court. No, that's not the question. Are you acting under your oath of office at this moment in time? Yes or no? I don't think you have the right to ask me that question. Right, that's it. You're under arrest. Now, policeman, take that gentleman into safe custody. We will come down to the station. We will make the appropriate statements. The charge is contempt of court and treason and abuse of process. The negotiator explains the position to the policeman. He or she explains it is not their job to decide that the judge or the magistrates are innocent and thus rescue them, but to carry through the arrest, take statements from everyone and let a future court decide on the guilt or innocence. In other words, their standard procedure, because that's the way the law works. It's what they do every day. Courts always decide on guilt of innocence, not policymen. The negotiator, if he doesn't get the 2 police to do it, will ask them to call a superior, sergeant and inspector. the sergeant or the inspector, they will do that. You know, it's easy enough. They get on the radio. Sergeant or the inspector arrives. You go through. You get the sergeant first. You go through it with the sergeant. No, he can't make the decision. Right, get an inspector. No, he can't get it. I want to speak to the chief constable. Then. Whatever, you know. Just take it as high. Keep going as high as you can. The object being to either get the judge arrested or to waste as much time as possible. If, after all negotiation has been exhausted, the policymen will still not do their job, everyone leaves peacefully. The negotiator says, OK, right, well, they're not going to do it, so will you all please leave peacefully and quietly? Everybody gets up and leaves. Now, the other people are there just to observe and to be prepared to make the statements on what they saw. That's the point of them, and also obviously moral support and all that. The amount of time this will take will leave the court and the policymen in the position of not wanting it to happen regularly. My proposal is to get yourself together in small groups and do that as often as you possibly can, all over the country. There is nothing to stop you. That is the way forward. Right. The HMCS flagship, the Northampton Bulk Clearing Centre, more justice on the cheap. Unpaid demands from utility companies, policymen and local authorities are sent there to be rubber stamped into warrants by deputy district judges. A deputy district judge is a solicitor who performs the rubber stamping role between 5 and 15 days a year and just changes hands when that hand wears out. They will rubber stamp anything. Typographical errors, errors of substance, no account number. You know, there are many examples. It's quite obvious they don't read, nor do they consider, let's face it, they're only solicitors. Anything. It's a waste of time arguing with them. Their so-called warrants amount to nothing more than toilet paper. If a bailiff calls, he will almost certainly be wielding one of these toilet paper warrants. Tell him to go and get signed confirmation that the signatory judge was acting under their oath of office at the time. The oath of office is key and crucial. Orders, what are they? Oh, in case you don't get it, judge and magistrates are continually arbitrating without your consent, so that's unlawful. Applying statutory obligations on you when you've not agreed to be or promised to be bound by them. When did you apply to be in the society of the statutes? You didn't, neither did I. And they're expecting you to service their orders for free, when no business supplies its major products for free. If they want to consider you to be a legal fiction person, in other words, a small individual corporation, then they should expect a bill from that corporation for servicing any orders they issue, like all other businesses. If a court orders stationery, it expects to pay the supplier, doesn't it? And who sets the amount? The supplier. Try ordering from Littlewood's mail order and saying, I will pay X for these things. No, Littlewood's will say, here's the price, you pay that or you don't get it. Court staff shop around for the cheapest if it's whatever. Now that's normal, honourable business practice. Anything else is either blackmail, extortion, racketeering, fraud or just plain old theft. Now the policemen and servicemen, members of staff, all get paid via their wages and salaries for taking orders, servicing orders. No one services orders for free. If you want an order serviced, you must expect to pay for it. under the monetary system. What do you do with a bailiff? Well, a bailiff is just a moron and a thug, generally speaking, so the question is, what do you do with a moron who's also a thug? Answer, you never ever open the door under any circumstances, whatever they say. Tell him he's a public servant and that as a member of the public, and therefore you're therefore his master or mistress. And you don't require his services. I don't require the services of your company. I don't have to take your company's services any more than I have to shop in Summerfields or Asda or, Tesco. I can choose whose services I use, is the mindset you're in. As previously noted, tell him to go away and get the signatory judge to confirm in writing that they were acting under their oath of office at the time of signing his bloody stupid toilet paper warrant. Oh, you won't like it, and he may carry on, but, at least you go that far. Now, what do you do if a bailiff threatens to return with a policeman? You can tell him, I would, the policeman will also be a public servant, you will still remain the master or mistress, and would be perfectly happy and perfectly within your rights to sack the policeman as well. I'll sack the bailiff, I'll sack the policeman. Look, master, servant. Does the master do what the servant says, or does the servant do what the master says? Does the dog wag its tail, or does the tail wag the dog? You've got to get your mindset right. You are the dog. They are the tail. You wag them. They don't wag you. You can keep sacking. I mean, I know this is like, you tell the policeman he's sacked, he's going to laugh. But actually, going back to Hereford, a guy got arrested. He told the police that his fee schedule for being arrested was £1,000 each. And the policeman went, oh, that's okay, no problem about that. That's okay. So they arrested him, and he was there for an hour. They had to let him go, obviously, because he hadn't done anything wrong, but whatever. So now he's in the process of, he sent them a bill, which they won't pay. They won't pay, but he's then going to do a commercial lien on them. And they're going to shit themselves in the next few months. They're very blandly say, oh yeah, that's okay, grand, no problem, mate, no problem. They're going to shit themselves. The local council, 3 members of the local council have already shit themselves. Okay? Sorry?
It's going to be nasty in Hereford then.
Yeah, actually, police came round the other day and had a nice long chat with Guy, and it was very chummy, because the police are now beginning to realise that what Guy is doing is right. Things are going very well in Hereford at this moment in time, looking quite good, actually. One of the 3 in the local council came in on a Monday morning, cleared his desk, and nobody's seen him since. And Guy said, well, I rang them up and said, I've got a letter from him and I need a reference number to reply to it. And they said, he doesn't work here anymore. He came in on Monday, cleared his desk, and we haven't seen him since. He doesn't work here anymore. So Guy said, well, I want his job then. And they said, well, they haven't advertised it yet. He said, well, let me know, because I'd like to apply for his job. And that was one of the 3. The other 2, the other one, a woman is probably common purpose, we're fairly sure. Because when Guy was interviewed, actually, they said to him, this woman hasn't actually said you threatened her, but she doesn't like your attitude. Do you have any idea why that might be? And he said, well, it might be. It looks to me, the way she acts is as though she's one of these common purpose people. And he was talking to the policeman, and there was a policewoman, right, there looking at Guy, And he said her eyes went so wide I thought they were going to drop out of her sockets. So obviously he touched a raw nerve with the policewoman, didn't he? So anyway, yes, we are, that and the talks going on in Merseyside, yeah, there's some serious stuff going down. Which...
explain what a commercial lien is?
A commercial lien, it would take a while to explain it. Basically, a commercial lien, we believe, is your ultimate weapon against anybody that's wronged you. I think the best thing I can do, because of the amount I've got to get through and because of the time, and because I'm quite getting a bit knackered, if anybody is interested in basically a commercial lien, you write a statement of truth, you don't have to go through a court, you send it to whoever, they must write a statement of truth in rebuttal, but if you've written the truth, they can't rebut it. Also then say, well, and you owe me X number of pounds, but you name them. You have to name the individuals. You can't do a commercial lien on a company, you have to do it on people. So you go for the people who have only doing their job, but what they've done is they've wronged you by only doing their job. I mean, only doing their job did not help the German officers at the end of World War II, who were only obeying orders. Well, they were still found guilty and hung, because everyone is responsible for their own actions. And so even, I don't care if they're a pen pusher in the local council, it's up to them to discover whether local council tax is lawful or not before they start pushing pens in its favour. So basically, you find out the names of, for example, in the case of a company, you go to the Company's House website, you pay £1, you get the current appointments report, and that lists the current directors. So you write down a statement of truth and you name them, the directors of the company, because they're obviously responsible for what the company does. Everything the company does. You name them and you say, you have done this to me, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. There is a specimen of it in the latest copy of my book, that the top and the tail of it, you have to fill in the middle bit because you have to explain precisely what they did wrong. You make sure it's the truth. You send it to them, you give them 30 days to rebut it. They can't rebut it. Excuse me, at that point, they're in your debt. And you then do a to whom it may concern for the local paper, basically saying these people owe me, 100 grand. Name them. Put it in the local paper, and that makes it public. And suddenly they're in the shit, because in the local paper, everybody else realises that these people owe you 100 grand. So their credit worthiness goes right down if they don't pay you. Now the point is, you don't need to go to court to do it. Because it's based on your truth, you don't need a court to do it. The only way to get rid of a commercial lien is for you to get rid of it, or 99 years pass. Or there's one other way. If they take you to court with a jury, and the jury decides that you're asking for too much, or that you didn't have the right to, the wrong wasn't a wrong, then a jury can get rid of a commercial lien. But a judge can't, and the judges know they can't. So the only way court will be involved is if somebody took you to court. Now they have got to therefore take you to court with a jury, or they've got to pay you. If they don't, you can put a charge. If you can find out where they live, you can put a charge on their property. You can write it off to the land registry, and your charge goes to the top of the tree. A commercial lien goes to the top of the tree. So I'd suggest you Google commercial lien and Google mechanics lien. A mechanics lien is where you take your car in, okay, to be serviced or fixed, and then you don't pay them. They can hold your car. Yeah? It's the same principle. Don't need a court to do it. They can hold your car. It's their right until you pay them. And if you want a better description of commercial lien, then you type in Lien, L-I-E-N, Lien, L-I-E-n, dot F-M-O-T-L, free man on the land, initials of, lien.fmotl.com. And you'll get my description of the commercial lien process, pretty much. If you get bailiffs knocking, it's a good idea to have a notice of removal of implied right of access on your front door. This applies to both bailiffs and policymen, and also TV licence as well, and of course census anybody. You can also post up the policyman's oath and have a copy on the inside as well. Thus, if the bailiff actually manages to return with a policyman, you can say through the door, your oath of office is posted on the door. This is what you solemnly swore to do in order to obtain your warrant card. Read it carefully and reconsider it carefully, especially the bit about fundamental human rights. And then you'll realise you should not be here. The policeman's oath is, I, do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that I will well and truly serve the Queen in the office of Constable. Constable. Magna Carta says Constable, Sheriffs and Bailiffs. Magna Carta 45 says Constables, beg your pardon, yes, here's 45. Constables, Sheriffs and Bailiffs, that's the law of the land applied. We will appoint constables, sheriffs and bailiffs who know the law and are minded to observe it well. Constable, office of constable, with fairness, integrity, diligence and impartiality, upholding fundamental human rights. Not Human Rights Act human rights, not European Court human rights, but fundamental human rights. And according equal respect to all people, not corporations. And I will, to the best of my power, cause the peace to be kept and preserved. Their job is to prevent breaches of the peace. Not actually to da-da-da-da-da-da-da at 3 a.m. in the morning, breaching everybody's peace. Actually. Cause the peace to be kept and preserved and prevent all offences against people and property. And you're standing there next to the bailiff threatening to break my door down. No, your job is to prevent offences against people and property. His warrant doesn't say that it was signed by a judge acting under their oath of office. It's not therefore a lawful warrant. You have got to stop him from breaking my door down, not help him. And while I continue to hold said office, I will, to the best of my skill and knowledge, discharge all the duties thereof faithfully according to law. And if you want to know what law is, officer, read it. That's where it says it, just above. Get him to read it out loud a few times, repeat fairness, integrity, diligence, impartiality a few times, stress the word fundamental in fundamental human rights, which does not mean, therefore, any Human Rights Act, but it means indefeasible. What does indefeasible mean? Can't be taken away under any circumstances. Your right to life, your right to self-defence. Tell him according to law means read the whole paragraph and think about it. The notice of removal of implied right of access. I have to split it over 4 pages on this PowerPoint. To all that it concerns, notice to agent is notice to principal. Notice to principal is notice to agent applies. notice of removal of implied right of access. You are advised to read the following notice thoroughly and carefully. It is a lawful notice. It informs you. It means what it says. I hereby give notice that the implied right of access to the property known as, and you put in your address and postcode, and surrounding areas has been removed, along with all associated property, including, but not limited to, any private conveyance, in respect of the following. Any employee, principal agent, third party or representative, or any other person acting on behalf of or under the instruction of Her Majesty's Court Service. Oh, that reminds me. Oh, that reminds me. I presume most of you know what a swipe card is. A swipe card, it's a kind of a plastic card that they give to employees with a magnetic strip on the back so they can swipe it through a machine and they can get into through doors and maybe sign on in the morning and sign off with the swipe card. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's about the size of a credit card. Okay, I did a talk in Liverpool last Tuesday. And when we cleared up afterwards, we found a swipe card on the floor. You probably can't see this because it's a bit small. It's D. McGinnity's swipe card, and he works for Her Majesty's Court Service. We were thinking of ringing them up, Merseyside, HMCS. We were thinking of ringing them up and saying that it was handed in by a 14-year-old choir boy. And I want to, before I go on, I just want to read something else out, by the way, something else I forgot. Can we just come back to money for a second? And mortgages. Norman Montague was a governor of the Bank of England, and way back I do remember his signature, the signature Norman Montague, being on not this style of tenor, but I think the old, very old white ones. When I was young, they were kind of white, quite large. And I remember Montague Norman's signature. And he was the governor of the Bank of England, and he was addressing the Bankers Association in New York City in 1924. And I'm going to read a quotation. And this quotation was reprinted in the Idaho Leader in the USA on the 26th of August 1924. And has been read into the Australian Federal Hansard twice. Once by John Evans MP in 1926, and also by MD Cowan MP within the session 1930-1931. And what Montague Norman told the Americans was this: capital must protect itself in every possible way, both by combination and legislation. Debts must be collected, mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. When, through process of law, well, he meant legal, of course, but he said law. When, through process of law, the common people lose their homes, they will become more docile and more easily governed through the strong arm of the government applied by a central power of wealth under leading financiers. These truths are well known among our principal men, who are now engaged in forming an imperialism to govern the world. By dividing the voter through the party political system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. It is thus, by discreet action, we can secure for ourselves that which has been so well planned and so successfully accomplished. If that doesn't say it all, I'd like to know what does. Okay, right, going back to this, any agent, any employee, principal, of Her Majesty's Court Service or any other corporate body, i.e. company, howsoever named, any police officer, underlined, who is acting for the corporate police and not acting as a constable on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II and her people as expressed in the oath of office of all policemen and women, that is, as public servants, upon your oath of office to serve with fairness, integrity, diligence and impartiality, upholding fundamental human rights and according equal respect to all people, and that they will, to the best of their power, cause the peace to be kept and prevent all offences against people and property. Common law jurisdiction applies exclusively. Fundamentally, if you want to use this, you need to download the PowerPoint and basically copy it out. So I'm not really going to go through all this. I mean, it's all good stuff, but I'll leave you to study that yourself and get onto the last screen, where basically that's the last screen and you just change your calling to my calling to your calling. Right. Oh, common assault, yes. It occurs if you ever feel that your personal safety is under threat. It does not have to be physical. It can be mental. Common assault can be mental. If someone comes towards you in a threatening manner, they have assaulted you. If you feel your safety is threatened. Thus, if someone else is in the house when a bailiff or policeman threatens to break down the door, that someone else has been assaulted. Mummy, Daddy, are they going to break the door down? I think they might. Oh, I'm not, I'm frightened. They've assaulted your kids. In these circumstances, it's a good idea to point that out. After all, a bashed-in door would leave the other occupants unprotected, especially if it's pointed out to the policyman, listen, mate, this is not your fight. Your duty is to keep the peace, not to conspire to breach it. You're well out of your solemn duty and jurisdiction, unless, of course, you're prepared to guard the door until it's replaced, and that could take a week. The general policyman on the doorstep routine. Do you have reason to suspect there is a wanted person on these premises, and have you obtained a lawful warrant of entry in order to arrest that person? No, I'm helping the bailiff. Do you have reason to suspect that there are stolen goods on these premises, and have you obtained a lawful warrant of entry in order to search for them? Well, no, I'm accompanying this bailiff. Do you have reason to suspect there are illicit drugs on these premises, and have you obtained a lawful warrant in order to search for them? Well, no, I'm accompanying the bailiff. Do you hear a fracas going on, such as to give you the cause to believe that someone's life or limb may be in danger? Well, no. Then your sole point in being here is to prevent breaches of the police, my peace included. You can do that by arresting the bailiff for unlawfully breaching my peace. Debt collectors and bailiffs. The first thing you receive is a demand acting on behalf of someone else, often accompanied by a toilet paper warrant, rubber stamped by a deputy district judge, if you remember, a solicitor who does the job between 5 and 15 days a year. He's at the Northampton Bulk Clearing Centre, that's already discussed. But what's the real situation? As a human being, in common law, you are bound only in honour by obligations you have specifically agreed. You are bound in honour by them if you make an agreement. It comes back to taking responsibility for your actions and so on, but that's all. You can't be bound in honour by something somebody else has agreed on your behalf. Did you specifically agree to deal with the debt collectors or the bailiffs? Well, no. What right have they got to bother you? No right whatsoever. If someone pays off a debt on your behalf, they would be stupid not to have contacted you first in order to agree, one, that you agreed you actually owed it, and if they paid it off on your behalf, that you would pay them back. So when a debt collector buys up your debt without asking you first, they're being rather stupid. They don't do that, do they? They just waltz in, buy up the debt and start making demands with menaces. Utterly dishonourable, of course, but then they have no other choice. If they contacted you first, you tell them to keep their noses out of your private arrangements. Fuck off! Privity of contract. No one has any standing in a contractual situation except the two parties to the contract. A third party only has standing if both of the two parties to the contract agree. Privity of contract. They're steeped in dishonour from the word go, and you can tell them that, and I have, and I do. And I've dealt with about 7 or 8 of them that way. And if you do that long enough and hard enough, they generally give up, which often means selling it onto another firm. You just have to apply the same techniques. They seem to sell it on twice more, and that's it. It goes dead. If they say they are acting as agents, which is normal, you say, I don't deal with agents, I'll deal with the organ grinder, not the monkey. Go back to whoever your agent's for and tell them that's the situation. Now get off my doorstep, you've no right to be here. Now there are ongoing moves to use the fact that they are eventually forced to give up, to say that their original claims were therefore fraudulent, including those of the originator. And there is a case coming up next Tuesday in the High Court in London, precisely as a result of that. But I can't tell you any more than that at the moment. And to use this to correct statutory demands, that's what's happened, etc. And as I say, these moves are ongoing, and they've got away with it far too long. It's long past time to take back our country, I believe. Even the Bills of Exchange Act 1882 says the obvious: once a debt has been paid, that debt is extinguished. So when the firm of debt collectors buys the debt, it's paid off. It's extinguished. They paid it off for you. Fredericks International wrote to me about their debt collectors. They wrote to me. And I said, go away, I've got no contract with you. So their in-house solicitors, Brian Carter and Company, wrote to me. Okay? You need... So I wrote back a notice of cuntishness and consequent fee schedule, which is on my website. And I said to Brian Carter, if you're involved in this ridiculous situation, you must be a mentally retarded wanker. And I told him about the Bills of Exchange Act and said, if you really think you've going to get anywhere, you must be a mentally retarded banker. So anyway, about 3 days later, I got a letter from Frederickson's. I mean, I never heard from Brian Carter and Company again. I mean, that must be something I said, I don't know. But I got a letter from Frederickson's saying, we can't find your payment. And I wrote back, I said, you stupid sods, you're looking in the wrong column. You're looking in the ins column. The payment was in the outs column when you bought it. Never heard Never heard from them again from that day to this. If you're stopped, arrested by the policeman, this happens, forget that's non-common law only, no, in all cases. There are 3 golden rules if you're stopped by a policeman. Sorry, if you're arrested by a policeman. Say nothing is the first rule. The second rule is to say nothing. And the third rule is to say nothing. If you say anything, you will hang yourself. If you can afford the time to spend in the cells, don't give them your name under any circumstances. You can say, I haven't got one. I'm not accepting liability for a name. They may even, if they search you, they may even find a credit card on you, say, well, that's your name. You say, well, what right have you got to associate that name with me? Well, I found that credit card on you, so what? I might have stolen it. Why don't you charge me with stealing it? How can they charge you with stealing it when they don't know your name? Never mind, you know, this causes them like little... It seems, though, that for their purposes, you have to admit it, the name. Not sure about that, because I haven't been arrested that many times, but whatever. But if you do give them your name in order to get out of their clutches as soon as possible, you need to sign something. So basically what you write is signed under force and duress, so it does not count in law, and then sign it. All right? They won't like it, but they've got a signature, so they will probably let you go. Most certainly let you go. But they might tell you, you've got to make a statement. No. No, you don't make any statements. You can ask them, have you arrested me, yes or no? Have you cautioned me, yes or no? Have you charged me, yes or no? Then you've reached the limits of your function. I do not propose to enter at a pre-trial trial with you. You are not a qualified judge or magistrate, are you? I'll say everything I need to say in court. In court, are you acting under your oath of office at this time? That'll do for now. I'm almost at the end. You have to think free 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You have to act through. You have to get your mindset right. It's fundamentally what it amounts to. You have to take personal responsibility. I've already been through this. We're working on the commercial lien process. And again, I go lien.fmotl.com. With regard to debt collectors, debtbus.fmotl.com will get you to a free, downloadable, only works on Windows, I'm afraid, not Macintoshes, but it might work on a Windows X partition on a Macintosh. I haven't tried that. It's a free, downloadable program which you put in just the basics of the matter when you've got a letter from some debt collectors or whatever. There's a space for putting in the details and your own details, and it will write letters for you, personalised letters for you, which all you have to do is to sign. But you should make sure that when you send these letters, you do know what it's saying. So read it very carefully first and make sure you understand it. And the other thing is that it will also then prompt you to send follow-up letters and so on, and it keeps a track of it, and it also explains how to do it with making sure that they sign for these letters so that you can prove that they've received them. There are now thousands of doing this in the UK alone. There's every reason to suspect now that when a DCA receives one of our letters, they groan, oh no, not another one. Like, for example, go back to that You Are Not Alone, and Barbara Tete is going, another one. Right? I have never in 2 years of doing this had seen or had one reply from anyone that actually made sense back from them. Right, there's some handy links. They all end in fmotl.com, freemanonthelandinitialsof.com, reality.forum.radio.debtbus.freedom. Freedom dot gives you a link to this presentation. So that's probably the only one you need to remember. Freedom dot. Sorry?
Is it all in your book?
No, only the forums in the book. Can you not remember freedom? Please.
Emails, I'll email with a list of all the links.
Okay, fine. Oh, that's it. That's the enemy shite. Thank you very much.